Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Halo broadcast. I'm Gandhi, joined by a very, very special guest. I like to call him the Halo savant based on what I've heard so far about him. His name's Chaos Theory. He used to work for MLG. Chaos, how are you, my man?
I'm doing real good, Scott. How you been?
You know, Halo 2 Xbox Connect is literally driving me insane, but minus that, I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing very well, but I still suck at Halo 2 right now, which is really just wearing on me. But besides that, I'm good. So, Chaos, just real quick, give me a little bit of your background for some of those people out there who may not be familiar with you.
Okay, just as a real brief overview, I've been around the community since about 2003. I got into competitive Halo by going to a local tournament in 2004 and getting second place to a guy named Loke. I had no idea who this kid was, but I thought I was really good at Halo until I played him.
He was only good online.
Yeah, he ended up going on to win NLG 2004 Los Angeles, like a month after I beat him. So he beat Darkman in the finals. But so I got into the competitive community back in 2004, and really kind of just, I was always a little bit older than everybody else. I started playing Halo when I was 20. I'm 31 now.
Oh, wow, yeah, you were, well, that was kind of like the Halo 1 scene, though, back then, too. I mean, if you look at, like, Strange Purple was old, so was Darkman, Shiz.
Yeah, I'm like Darkman's age or whatever. So, anyway, I started playing back then, and I got really involved in the forums because I like talking about Halo. And after just being on the MLG forums for a couple months, I got sent an invitation by an old guy named Wicked Fiend, who used to be one of the admins there, who asked me if I wanted to be a moderator. And I just had a really high online presence in the Halo community ever since.
That's awesome, man. Now, you are, so basically, this is a Halo show, so you are a traditional Halo guy. Did you ever mess around with any other games since, really, I guess, like Halo 1 or 2?
You know, it's funny. I almost hesitate to even call myself a gamer because I'm kind of a Halo player.
Uh-huh.
I have at least 2,000 or 3,000 games of literally every Halo that's been around, with the vast majority of those being Halo 1 games because I never really stopped landing. I have touched on other games here and there. Like, I really enjoyed both Portal games and a few others, but as far as first-person shooters, man, I'm pretty strictly a Halo player.
Gotcha. So you never went over to, like, Call of Duty or, like, Rainbow Six or anything like that?
Negative.
God, I bet you hate where this scene is now then, my man.
You know what? It's all good. I respect everything for what it is. Whether or not I personally enjoy it is a different matter.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big thing. You know, anyone who blindly hates anyone is just ignorant. And we both know that. So, I was told that you have over 30,000 words as to what went wrong with Halo. Is this a fact?
It's a little bigger than that. I'd say the scope of it goes a little bit beyond what simply went wrong with Halo, but I do. It's about 62 pages right now, and it's probably a little more than half done.
Can you give me a little bit of like a background here as to what happened? Because I know you had an interesting conversation with a guy from Bungie. Yeah,
and that actually started on the forums. So I've been around the forums forever, and one day came about 30 days into the Halo Reach beta, which I'm sure you played because all you had to do was get ODST to get into it. And I was playing the Halo Reach beta, and I had a lot to say about it. And then I was like, great, because two guys from Bungie came onto the MLG forums, and they said, we want your feedback. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. They're actually coming to, some of the better players out there and saying, we want to know what's wrong with the game, what you like, what you don't. And so they made a thread called Official Reach Feedback Thread. And I posted in it, and it was real brief at first, just a little bit here and there. And then in response to someone else, a gentleman named Shishka, who used to work for Bungie, he said, I just want everybody to know that all I want to know is whether or not you like something. If you're writing a large, tome on whether or not, this mechanic is good for a mid-range rifle or that mechanic is good for a mid-range rifle, I don't really care what kind of self-accreditation you have or how long you've been playing. I just want to know whether or not you like it, and anything else will be skipped.
That is such a that is like the most disheartening thing of all time, right?
Yeah, and
I've had so many conversations with developers too, where it's like, you feel like your words fall on deaf ears, right? But at least now they pretend to listen to an extent, right? Like some of them actually do listen, but to have someone outright just basically say, I don't care, that had to have pissed you off.
I had been literally obsessed with Halo for 7 years at that point. I was in 2010. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because it's something that you're passionate about. It's something that, like, you've taken the time to learn stuff that nobody else knows. You've taken the time. I mean, you know about a lot of the Halo 1 tricks and grenade from 100 place on the map and every spawn point. And, when you get to that level of understanding about a certain game, and then someone basically just comes along and says, I don't care what you know or what experience you have, it's getting just spit in the face. Like, it really, really bothered me. But what stuck out to me most about his comment was, I don't care what kind of self-accreditation you have. And that got me thinking, okay, what does he care about then? What does he care? If he doesn't care about self-accreditation, if he doesn't care about experience or skill or anything like that, what does he care about? And I thought, game designers. That's obviously the person that he looks up to. So I got pissed off. And when I get pissed off, I try to get more information. And what I did was I went online and I found like the top 8 books that are like the quintessential game design classics and the ones that they teach in school, like the textbooks. And I downloaded 8 books.
Oh,
and I read all 8 of those books because it pissed me off.
How many pages are these books? Like, textbooks and game designs have to be...
I skipped over the coding parts of them, but I really was interested in the design areas.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I found a really interesting thing when I was reading these books. All of these books were written by relatively older people, okay, because these are the people who are now the authors, the experts on the subject. And these people all cited their inspirations and their points of reference for how to make good video games. And some of their favorite games they were listing weren't video games. They were board games. They were saying, like, some of my favorite games or my inspiration for game design was, like, Monopoly and Candyland and just silliness. And not silliness, chess is a great board game, etc.
Yeah.
But it really stuck out to me that they were looking at board games for replayability purposes. And so when a lot of these designers first started doing this, they were dealing with Atari, NES, really limited resources, right? So I'm sure you've played old 8-bit NES games.
Of course.
The originals, like the first generation of them, they were incredibly difficult.
Yeah, simplicity at its finest. You were rewarded by beating the game because the game was actually hard, not guided through the game because you are of lower intelligence, of lower skill.
Sure. I mean, beating the game was something that very few people could say if you're talking about something like Contra. Where it's the replayability came from difficulty. It came from really going after people who have that determination to succeed, that determination to be better. And that was really common in Asian culture, which Nintendo was a Japanese company. Konami, which is the developer for, that game, is an Asian company. And I don't want to get too deep into the difference in cultures between Western culture and Asian culture, but there's a lot of people over there that are really determined to get incredibly good. So they were able to play on that and say, this is really hard, and you're going to keep playing it until you win. And it worked for a really long time. And then I think they started to realize that there was a large demographic that they were missing out on. Obviously video games are a big industry, and they had to start at some point by becoming that industry that they are today by making more and more money. By making games that difficult, if you took and made a kid today play Contra for 5 minutes, he wouldn't make it past the first level for hours.
No, he wouldn't.
And those kids will quit. So with those limited resources back then, their solution to that problem was make the games easier, but make them random. Because if you make them random, then the player doesn't have the same experience every single time. It actually feels like a unique challenge every time you go into it because the enemy came from a different direction. The enemy came at a different time, whereas Contra, it's all memorization, really.
So you're saying that randomness randomness being introduced into games then makes the game itself easier, just because it's not the.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, if you can, that may be the case a little bit later down the line. But really, primarily, what I'm talking about is the core of the older people who told all these newer game designers how to develop games. And they all came from a scenario where, one, there was maybe some randomness, RNG in board games, and then two, they came from a time where randomness was necessary to make the game fun because you're playing against the computer. And that's where the distinction really needs to be brought, is that when playing against a computer, randomness is great. Randomness is awesome. But as soon as you make the switch, and there was a large paradigm shift that happened around the mid-90s when PvP games started to really become popular, like Street Fighter, like Mortal Kombat, some of the PC games like Quake. When these games started to come around in the mid to late 90s, there were a few developers who started on their own and didn't necessarily program a lot of randomness into their games. And they were very difficult to be good at because with no randomness, it really comes down to player versus player. It becomes a lot more like chess, where no one ever complains that someone got lucky in a chess game because you have 100% control over everything that happens in chess. There's no excuses that can be made. And that idea unfortunately did not really hold. And they took the idea that worked before and said, make the games a little bit easier, make them a little bit more random, and we'll allow, this player that maybe wouldn't always beat this player another time to possibly be able to do that. And in my personal opinion, I think the last game that really, really stood by those older principles of no randomness in a PvP game was Halo 1, a game that a lot of people still play to this day, and is personally still my favorite video game ever created by quite a long shot.
Okay, so now, I do agree. I agree to an extent. I wouldn't say that Halo 2 was completely random, but there are factors of it.
I don't think it was at all.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying there is 100% set random factors. But if you look at Halo 1 as well, there is random factors in that game as well. Right? Because let's take TS Hang 'em High, just for example. Me and you are playing against two other people. We may spawn top one. I may spawn top blue. You may spawn at the camo. They may spawn blue shotgun. The same game, reloaded again. We spawn red tombstone. They spawn top blue. Like, that's a random factor, though. So are you saying you minimize that?
No. I don't think you minimize that at all. In fact, I think that's actually a much bigger conversation if you want to start getting into talking about player spawns and stuff.
Oh no. Don't worry. We're hitting on that, my man. But you can continue this.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I really mean more in RNG that affects individual battles. RNG that is. Don't get me wrong. I think TS Hang 'em High 2v2 at top levels has a ton to do with luck and randomness. And
there's a portion for sure.
I'm not blind to that at all.
Yeah, no. There's a portion for sure.
I'd take Dammy or Priz over Hang 'em High any day of the week. Not even close.
I'll take on host Priz.
Yeah, on host Priz is a lot of fun. I could play that all night.
Oh God.
But anyways, just to not get too far away from the point, was just that all the ideas that randomness needs to be included to be fun is present in all of these books. Every one of these books I read says randomness needs to be there, otherwise it's not fun. Like, randomness is this necessary element of fun. Like, you can't have it unless you've got a dice roll here and there to make it interesting and to make it exciting. And I think for board games, I think for player versus computer games, that they're absolutely right. I just think that they missed out on a huge opportunity to really exploit that same determined demographic that played Contra all the way to the end, and made video games more like sports. We call them esports today. But look at basketball. Nobody thinks basketball has to be random to be fun. The hoop doesn't move 6 inches every couple of seconds, and it makes it more fun. The way you have fun in basketball is you match up other people who are at the same skill level as you. No one has fun in basketball when it's Kobe versus the kid around the corner. No one has fun in Halo when you have to match people like you against somebody who started playing the game 2 weeks ago. And that's where the distinction is really important. You don't dumb down the gameplay elements to make these people have more fun, to make, random kid 123 be able to spawn with a bolt shot and kill Gandhi. And that makes it a little bit more fun or more interesting for him. You make sure random kid 123 only teams or only matches up in matchmaking against random kid 321. You really, really have to focus on making sure. That's why there's divisions in chess. That's why there's junior varsity, college, D1 college, NBA, and basketball. Because any one of those levels matching up with any other level is going to absolutely blow them out of the water to the point nobody has fun. And that's why ELO and StarCraft work so well. That's why, ELO and chess, which is where it started, really, is that developers really underestimate the importance of matching skill in a game that's designed to show who's better.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cut you off here for a second, man. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, more. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I am still joined by Chaos, but I'll probably be saying that for the next 3 hours. So, embrace. Chaos, how are you?
Not too bad. How you doing?
Good. Hanging out. All right, so let's talk. So we ended with RNGs, basically. And would you like to continue on that just a little bit? Or because you did touch on matchmaking as well, and I'm cool with either.
Yeah, we can really go either way. I mean, matchmaking, I think, is really of the utmost importance because it's the solution. It's the end game. It's how you can have a great game that bad people can have fun with. It's how you can have a great game that great people can have fun with.
Now, in your opinion, though, okay, so throughout everything, obviously you know how true skill works, correct? To an extent? Okay, yeah, you've experienced that. We all have had the misfortune of experiencing that. What do you think is like the best matchmaking playlist? Because, when you look at like StarCraft, right, you have the divisions. And in League of Legends, you have an ELO system. And as you said, chess, you have it that way as well. Do you think ELO can actually work with a game that's team dependent?
That is a really good question. I think it can if you're talking about consistent teams. I don't think it can really do that in a game where it's really a measure of teamwork and you've got people going in individually into these playlists.
Yeah.
If it's a ranking system for a team game, it needs to go across the board. It doesn't need to rely on the true skill of individuals on the team. I think honestly the developers are in a really sticky situation when it comes to mixed parties. There's really not a lot of great ways they can do that, but
do you have any idea? What would you personally do in this scenario?
Are we talking about from scratch or what I would do right now?
Like right now. Like let's say 343 called
right
you
now,
up and they said mixed parties. How do we rank these people?
Now, I'm going to take a lot of flack from the Halo community from this, and I'm going to explain why. Anyone who's played Halo in the last 8 years knows that there is a small subgroup of players who go into Halo matchmaking and care about one thing and one thing only, and that's kill-to-death ratio. Everyone's played against them. Everyone's played with them. We all know what it's like.
Yeah, we have.
I think right now, the way to match players up for a temporary basis is to take the sum of the kill-to-death ratios on one team and match it with the sum of the kill-to-death ratios on another team. And I'll tell you why, because everyone who's in the tournament community knows that kill-to-death ratio means jack. You can have a 3.0 kill-to-death ratio and go out first round in an MLG tournament. Everyone knows that. My point is that kill-to-death ratio may not be a great determiner of great from good, because those people are good, but they're not great. They're not tournament great. However, that number is a fantastic determiner of good from bad. It is a great way to tell, on average, who's good at the game and who's not. Now, it's not good for great versus good. It's not good at a tournament level. It is good on a matchmaking level. And everybody who, it's funny, I've had this experience, because I have a half-decent kill-to-death ratio in Halo 4. It's like a little over 2.0. But whenever I go in and other good people match up with me in the lobby, a lot of the times they'll back out because they don't want to play against someone else good because they want to keep padding their own stats. Too much pub stomping happens in Halo, and when there's too much pub stomping, kill-to-death ratios go really up on one side, they go really down on another. Anybody who has the experience of going 1-19 in a game isn't going to want to play that game anymore.
Yeah. Well, couldn't you do separate playlists?
What I think you should do is you should just, if you have two people with 2.0 on one team and nobody at that level on the other, you just need to try to make sure that that person is maxed up. That could mean longer search times. It could be a lot of things that I think maybe I'm not even taking into consideration here. But if you're worrying too much about their true skill number and not about how they have proven themselves to be able to play individually in a match, I think you're going to end up with a lot of mismatches. Anybody who's played Halo 4 knows that you can get totally thumbless kids against a team of great players all the time. All the time. And that should never happen, because that's why people are leaving Halo. Nobody feels powerful when people go in and play against people that they should never match up with.
Do you full-heartedly believe that the matchmaking is the end-all, be-all for the decline in Halo over the Halos?
No, I think the gameplay has suffered greatly. And I think it's been a combination of things. It's kind of a long list. I think that poor matchmaking certainly has a big part of it, but it's by all means not the only thing, nor even the biggest thing.
What do you think is the biggest thing? Or you can just kind of go on, because I know that for me personally, if I got asked that question, I would say, where do I begin? So I know that's a wide variety of things you can kind of pull from there. So feel free to just kind of...
I'm not exactly the most concise person, so when you ask me something that makes me pause for 5 seconds, that's definitely a difficult question. Now, from my perspective, I have like two ways of looking at this, really. One is that, and you may take issue with this because I know you're a huge Halo 2 fan, and I'm not saying, I would never say Halo 2 is a bad game by any stretch. It was a great game, especially by 2007.
Okay.
Halo 2 rode a gigantic wave from the gate. Halo 2 was a fun game to play, but most importantly, it was the only game to play that had the matchmaking capabilities, the Xbox Live Party, where you could talk to your friends, and it came in with 8 million people who already loved Halo. So it rode this giant wave, and I'm not saying it was a bad game. I'm saying that even if it had been a bad game, it would have been successful anyway. At least for a time.
Okay. I'm letting it slide.
Halo 3 continued to ride that wave. Halo 3 was extremely popular.
Yeah.
I think, though, at a certain point, that people like to feel successful. So I say that because nobody wants to feel weak in a video game. And you take Halo 3 was definitely not the most individually empowering game. It was still very much a team game, with the not having a close range option like BLB or BXR, not having, a gun that can contest a sniper quite as easily as Halo 1 or Halo 2. And while it was very popular, that was also in 2007-ish, also the time when Modern Warfare really started to pick up. That was when COD really started to get a huge following behind it when Halo 3 got bumped off the #1 charts for Xbox Live.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Call of Duty, but I will say one thing. You feel extremely powerful in Call of Duty, especially when you're playing against people that you're only slightly better than.
Yeah,
because they die quick. So you can go in by yourself and get kills just by seeing someone before they see you. And that doesn't fly at top levels, I know that. But for the most part, it's about getting first look on your opponent. It's really more of a outthinking more than anything else. So if you can do that, even if it's by camping or whatever, you feel powerful. You take a game like Halo 3 and, God forbid, the real decline, which started in Halo Reach, where you see somebody first and you take out your, even if they're far away, you take out your BR, your DMR, you can't kill that person before they can get away if they know what they're doing. You can't. It necessitates team shooting to a degree that it is absolutely necessary to win, even against people who are only the same level as you or even slightly worse. You still need teamwork to beat them.
Yeah, it's true.
And the reason for that is not very complex, but it's a longer discussion. And the fact is they took that feeling of powerlessness that was already sort of there in Halo 3, but it didn't matter because Halo 3 was still really popular. And they made it so much worse in Reach. And anybody who has spammed 10 or 11 shots against the guy at mid to long range and watch those DMR bullets doing nothing understands that.
Yeah, no, I think everyone did. I think for me, and I would love to get your take on this as well. For me, when I look at like Halo, obviously Halo is in a good spot in Halo 3 as well. Whether or not I full-heartedly believe in the wave, I will say that Halo 1 did save Xbox. I will say that. I would say Halo 1 is the reason why Xboxes are in stores. And I think even a lot of people at Microsoft believe that to an extent as well. But for me, when I look at Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo 3, we had a couple things that were very similar, right? We had overshields. We had camos. We knew they were on timers. We had rockets and we had snipers, all on a timer. Now, granted, it gets deviated from game 1 to 2 to 3, but we still have those 3. Right? And we had the core dynamics, right? But in Halo Reach, what was added was armor abilities, sprint, and things that were not traditional to the game. And that, for me, is really what breaks it. I think sprint ruined it.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. And I feel bad because there's a whole generation of Halo players who think sprint is fine. They think sprint is no big deal, that it even improves the game. And I think what really needs to be brought to the fore is that even though I've had a lot of arguments and discussions with this, I still very, very fundamentally believe that sprint is a defensive option primarily. And that the biggest failing of so many of these last 2 Halo games was that they ultimately focused on defense. Because people, they do these case studies and these test studies with really bad players. And they say, what do you like about the game and what don't you like? And they say, well, I don't like how I die so fast. But at the same time, they're not really dying that quickly. They're just inexperienced. They don't know how to react when they take that first shot. And so much of Halo Reach and Halo 4 is about defense. I mean, think of the armor abilities are almost all defensive. There's, armor lock, of course, is 100% defensive, other than being able to take a shield to somebody close to you. And God forbid you want to talk about Halo 4. Half of the perks are defensive buffs. You have a perk that allows you to survive longer in vehicles. You have one that allows you to pop out of a vehicle when it's destroyed. You have one that lets your shield come back quicker. You have one that lets you run through bullets without slowing down. There's 100 things that can happen in Halo 4. You've got regen, bubble shield. Those are from Halo 3. That's where that started.
And they got taken out real quick.
Hard light shield. Thruster pack is used primarily defensively. Defensive option after defensive option after defensive option will completely, when used effectively, add to that feeling of powerlessness that you have when you shoot at somebody and they don't die for whatever reason. That's one of the biggest complaints that COD players have about Halo, other than the stupid realism argument, which doesn't matter.
That means nothing. Do you... Okay, well, I guess I'll ask a quick question with a yes or no. Do you believe that sprint can live in a game? Sprint can only live in a game when the kill time is very quick?
Yes.
Okay, so that's that. But second question is going to come up after this quick commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Gandhi, joined by Chaos. Chaos, question number 2. I remembered it now. Do you believe, so you just get done talking about how there's only defensive abilities and, you feel powerless when you don't kill people. Do you believe, would you rather have offensive abilities?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Offensive abilities can be compared to glitches. Granted, glitches are much more difficult to pull off, but if you included a offensive ability that had a risk factor, like a cooldown time, or it prevented you from doing anything for a time afterward, or it took some of your shields, or had any number of ways to make it risky, it would be comparable to those glitches. You have BLB in Halo 1, double melee, which allows you to kill someone up close instantly, but it drops a grenade at your feet if you don't do it right. So in a way, that becomes an offensive option you have. It's an option that can get you out of a situation you would have otherwise died in 100% of the time. VXR is the same way. There's less of a risk in VXR because you can pull it off or keep shooting so many times afterward. But it's an offensive option up close. One could even make the argument that double shot is like an offensive option, maybe not compared to an armor ability, but it's something different you can do in battle that you have to make a choice of whether or not it's good to pull off at that particular moment. And I think an offensive armor ability could play very similarly. We just have never seen one.
Have you watched any Destiny footage at all?
I watched Ninja play it for about an hour the other day.
What do you think about the special ability?
I think it's better than the armor abilities in Halo, that's for damn sure. Beyond that, I don't think I have watched enough of it to really say one way or the other. The people who was playing against were not particularly talented, so I couldn't really tell if anything was overpowered, since Ninja is quite a good player himself, no matter what he's playing.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so now I'm gonna bring this back to the Halo 1 talk after you've already insulted me about my Halo 2. How dare you? But I'm kidding. Anyways, moving forward. So Halo 1, you believe, is the last good Halo, basically, and the last good FPS. At least true to your standards.
That's oversimplifying it. It's the one I enjoy the most.
Okay.
Yes, and in my opinion, yeah, it's head and shoulders above pretty much everything that's come out since then, in my opinion.
Why is that?
Oh,
and you have an open floor, man. I'll kick my feet up. I'm cool. I'm kosher.
Yeah, that's a really long rant for me, man. If I had to boil it down to a couple things, it would really be how I happen to define balance. And balance is just that a player always has a chance, no matter what the situation, to overcome a disadvantage, and two, that as a whole, the better player is rewarded for things that he does right.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. So the kill time in Halo 1 is unlike anything in any other first-person shooter that's ever come out. Because the kill time from the time the first trigger is pulled to the time the Spartan spins is about 0.6 seconds. A little more than half a second. The human reaction time is about a quarter of a second. And then it's probably, in my estimation, about another half a second for you to move those thumbsticks and then position them on the enemy that is shooting at you and then start to shoot back. So if you look at the kill time when fired perfectly, you reward perfect shots, and there's no drawback. If you have perfect shots in Halo 2, 3, Reach 4, that person still has time to turn around and put 2 shots on you every time. You start shooting somebody who's not looking from the side, they have time to turn around and put 2 shots on you before they go down. You now will likely lose your next battle if it is fair and the other person is the same skill as you. You're at a disadvantage. So that player has been given a disadvantage for otherwise perfect play. In Halo 1, that doesn't happen, because if you catch somebody off guard in Halo 1, you 3 them before they have a chance to turn around, every time. There's nobody gets 3-shotted from the back in Halo 1 and has time to turn around and put shots on their other player. You only get potentially bad random spawns on 2 dead. You are rewarded for staying alive. It's never random if you never die. And that's oversimplification, I understand that.
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
There are penalties for doing good things. There are penalties for doing bad things. And if a player is always rewarded for good play and never penalized for good play, and there's always a chance, like even if they have camo rockets, if you can 3 the guy with the pistol who is jumping towards you with camo rockets, he still dies. You can't do that in any other Halo game without a power weapon. You can't.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why I think it's different, and that's why I think it's better, is because there's not been a single other game that has a similar kill time other than Call of Duty, which will show you the difference between perfect shots and average shots. The average kill time in Call of Duty is half a second. Everybody can kill someone before they can turn around in Call of Duty. It doesn't take anything special to do that.
Now, when we break down Halo and compare it to other Halos, let's take timing, for example, right? One of the big differences that happened between Halo 1 and Halo 2 was that in Halo 1, everything was on a set timer period, right? You had, snipers every 30 seconds. You had camo every 2 minutes. You had overshield every hour, just in general, right? So you always had that. In Halo 2, they threw a curveball at everyone, and they decided to make a dynamic timer on both weapons and... Well, actually, I don't even know what it's called in Halo 2, but dynamic was the overshield. So let's say I pick it up at 14:45, it's gonna come up again at 12:45. But the sniper, they changed it a little bit to where if I held it on my person until I dropped that rifle, it would never spawn. What do you think about that?
I think that is another really, really long discussion, but how to summarize? God, man, like seriously, I could.
You don't have to summarize, my man.
Okay, so it's about barriers to entry, is what that's about.
What the hell does that mean?
This applies to both Halo 1 and Halo 2, but it doesn't have to in a great Halo game that may not have been developed yet. Let me explain why. In Halo 1, when both teams understand that overshield comes up every 1 minute and rockets come up every 2, it doesn't get any more fair than that. Both teams have the same information. The contest is now who shoots better, who makes better decisions, who throws better grenades. There is no additional information that one team has that gives them an advantage over the other, and that is true every 60 seconds for the duration of the entire game.
Okay.
When you take that away and it becomes like Halo 2, in programming it's called cascading. So it's a cascading advantage. One person outshoots another player and they get the rockets. They shoot a couple rockets out and they now have better position. It's a cascading advantage. Not only did I have the better BR than you, but now I have rockets and I have a 4-kill lead and a better position. So that's a cascading advantage. And that in and of itself is not a bad thing. Cascading advantages are necessary for good play. But when it becomes an informational advantage that I get to now choose when that rocket comes back up, it's too much. It's the same thing that happens in, any game that you get to now have an informational advantage over the other team. Like, you were a Halo 2 pro. I don't need to explain this to you. You guys, you had to choose when the new sniper came up on lockout.
Yeah.
You got to choose when to throw it down.
Yeah.
The other team has no idea that you're doing that. None.
Would you not say that Wouldn't you not say that adds a competitive advantage, though, for being rewarded to acquire the sniper?
Sure, it's a cascading advantage. I agree, and you should definitely get that sniper if you're the one to acquire it. But I have a personal belief that the other team should have a fair chance at the next one. They need to be able to make up for their mistakes. They need to be able to prove that they're better on the next round without going in at an inherent disadvantage already.
That makes sense. I can understand that. I think...
Yeah. And sorry, if you give me one more second, what I was going to say was it's very easy to implement this like in a future Halo game. You've seen the weapon waypoints that you have, like if you have drop recon enabled in Halo 4, or when there's an incoming hill, there's a little shadowy waypoint on it or whatever.
Uh-huh.
If you taught people how to play the game instead of continually dumbed down with easier and easier mechanics, I think a lot of people would have fun with that style. If everyone in the game knew that rockets was coming up in 15 seconds because of some stupid waypoint that's in the middle of the map. Now, I don't want that waypoint to stay there after the weapon spawns because that's, again, giving a disadvantage for doing something right. And, like in Halo 4 now, if you pick up a power weapon, somebody knows you grabbed it and knows your position. And you did something good by acquiring that power weapon and you got penalized for it. I hate that. Anyway, it was just leading up until the weapon spawned. You're teaching people how to play the game. Yeah, at low levels, it would be a whole bunch of people gathered in the middle of the map, all fighting for 5 seconds over the same rocket. And, a good player could just stand back and shoot them all like it's King of the Hill really easily. But at least you're teaching people how to play. You're teaching them to learn from their mistakes, saying, hey, yeah, rocket's going to spawn in 10 seconds, but maybe I should look around. Because the last time I did this, somebody was just waiting for me to go for it.
Interesting. All right, well, let me throw another Destiny reference at you since it's fresh in my mind. So one of the things about Destiny, as you know, you have 3 weapons off the rip, okay? You have your specialized weapon, which has limited ammo, and then you have your heavy weapon. Now, there are certain drops for both of those guns that are on a timer in set locations throughout the duration of the game. Obviously, in a first-person shooter, that there is shields and there is a time limit, there has to be something that promotes map movement. We can both agree on this, correct?
Yeah.
Has to be something. Do you think that approach is better than everything being on a timer? In regards of like power weapons, do you think it's more fair that everyone has said weapon on their person instead of fighting over it? Or do you believe there should be a battle over it?
I'm biased. I'm always going to lean towards the Halo 1 way of doing things, or even just the Halo way of doing things. I think controlling power weapons is a fantastic dynamic for determining a better team. I mean, there's like 100 ways to get rockets on Damnation in Halo 1. You know, there's so many different ways. You can bait it, you can nade it up the top of the map, you can nade it out, you can nade camo down and get it easily, you can get camo up top and then jump down and acquire it. There's like 1,000 ways to do everything. I think the creativity and the ingenuity required to really go after a power weapon in 100 different ways, or whatever the circumstances would be, is really a great test of someone's creativity and their ability to learn from previous mistakes and learn from other situations and to outmaneuver and outthink the opponent. I don't think just giving it to everybody at the start is good any more than I think spawning with a one-shot weapon like a bolt shot at the beginning of every game is good. I don't think everybody should spawn with a shotgun, and I don't think everybody should spawn with a rocket sitting in their backpack either.
Wouldn't you say, though, that the thing that made Halo 1 so dynamic would be nade tricks?
It contributed, but the game would still be amazing without them. Well, not amazing. It would be good without them.
Yeah, it would be good. It wouldn't be amazing.
Yeah, because, I mean, specific maps would break. Damnation would absolutely break.
Yeah, Damnation would suck.
Priz would be fine. There's still tons of maps that aren't utterly reliant on nade tricks, where they're going to have an effect on the outcome of a competitive game less than 1% of the time. I'd say Priz is probably one of them. Maybe nading camo back bottom middle when you've got an opponent coming close to it. There's not really a lot of situations where that's going to make a huge impact. But maps like Damnation would absolutely break, yes. Yeah,
Dammy would break. I don't think Derelict would break necessarily. I mean, I guess
getting that camo down is really important.
Yeah, getting the camo down. But we're calling for another ad here. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, still here. Stay tuned. Still here with Chaos. Chaos, my man. I have a question for you. When Halo's been on this slump, obviously, and we can call it a slump since Halo Reach, what was your initial reaction when you heard that the Master Chief Collection was coming out?
Every other Halo fan's reaction, I was almost, if I hadn't been at work, I would have jumped out of my chair. Like, I was extremely excited. I just literally could not believe that I was hearing, exact same multiplayer for all 4 games, dedicated servers, 60 frames per second, 1080p. I was wigging out like everybody else who loves Halo as much as I do. I thought it was a fantastic announcement.
Are you, okay, so God, I really hope you agree with this. Do you think that Halo 1 1v1 or 2v2s were better than 4v4s at a
Absolutely,
competitive level? Okay. Now,
no question.
With that said, are you expecting Halo 1 to be the game that's played competitively, or have you accepted the fact that it's going to be Halo 2?
Probably not going to go anywhere. I'm okay with being something more similar to the Smash community, where we can host our own tournaments and have that grassroots feel and community that Smash was between 2007 and this year. Smash was abandoned for 7 years, and they kept it alive on their own because they love the game that much. But as far as seeing it for Master Chief Collection come back into the competitive scene, I think the ideal Master Chief Collection tournament setup would be a 4v4 Halo 2 or even maybe Halo 3 with a side tournament for Halo 1 2v2s.
Now, assuming you were to run a tournament right? Not saying you are teasing it for anything, but just for this terminology here. Would you do an FFA, assuming it's Halo 1, would you do an FFA to determine the seeds for 2v2s, or would you actually try to host 4s? Because God knows, 60 frames per second with everyone being on their own monitor, because split screen, I think, is out. It might be okay, but I'm expecting it to kind of be everyone on full screen. I think that might cut down on the host advantage, which could then mean it could be good. But would you host a 2v2 or a 4v4 event in Halo 1?
I'd host 2v2, but I'm going to hold off on whether or not 4v4 is going to really be viable until we see it. I don't think it's really wise to really say one way or the other that, yeah, 4v4 is going to be awesome on separate screens. And there's a host of problems with Halo 1 4v4 that extend beyond just the hardware limitations of the original Xbox, although that is the majority of it.
What are some of the other limitations in your opinion?
One, so much of what made Halo 1 good was the dynamics of the spawn system, which goes completely out the window when you have 4v4. Because the game will literally randomly choose between one of your 3 teammates that it's going to spawn you with, and one of them will pretty much always be near a spawn point for the entirety of the game. So there's no great control. I mean, there is to some extent. So, like, if you get 3 dead and there's 1 person left and hang them high and they can be below blue pistol, yes, they can spawn all of their teammates up there. And there are some things you can do. If you go back and you watch the old SDK videos or whatever, you can see a lot of spawn manipulation, especially in Dammy and such, even in 4v4. But for the most part, it's really possible to spawn trap a team in Slayer.
Yeah.
Really, really possible. Anyone who's played a lot of Halo 4v4 against good people knows that there is just sometimes nothing you can do for long stretches.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I think some of the cascading advantages that I mentioned earlier, especially in objective, like if you played Wizard CTF or Derelict PTF, again, there are long stretches where you're just getting spun off spawn for
you're dying consistently.
Yeah, even and that's not to say that can't shift back to you being the one doing it, but when you've only got like 8 or 12 spawn points in Derelict CTF, and most of them are out in the open, and you've got Camo Snipe spawning on 30 seconds and 1 minute respectively, you can just kind of sit there and quick camo to your assault rifle with sniping people off spawn for a long time. It's really fun to do when you're on the giving end of it. It is not fun on the receiving end. So
yeah, it isn't.
There's a handful of things about Halo 1 4v4 that may not be perfect. I still think it could be a great game 4v4. I just would like to see it happen first.
Okay. I wanted to get your take on that. I was very curious because, most people from Halo 1 do agree that it's 2v2 we're it. And I wonder, how do you think a 2v2, because there's nothing really in esports that's ever 2v2, right? Like if you look at everything, most things are 5v5, 3v3, or if you're a console FPS player, 4v4. Do you think 2v2 would excel?
I think it could. I think it's a lot easier to find 1 teammate than it is to find 3. Again, this is an experience that you've had, and anyone who's tried to go to a Halo 4v4 tournament, I mean, they didn't have the term shady Halo kids for no reason. No. It's really hard to find 3 people who are going to be on the same page when it comes to spending a bunch of money on plane tickets and traveling somewhere and trying to win a video game tournament. I think it's a lot easier to find 1 person you trust, though. 1 person that's going to stick with you and be your teammate. I think it could excel. I think there's really not a niche market for that right now, and there could be.
What about the viewing experience, though? Would you put each person on their own screen? Because one of the biggest problems that we have in esports, right, especially in console FPS, is that you can't see all point of views. When you look at it, even MOBAs and everything, until the game gets on longer towards the end of the game, when everyone starts grouping up, then you start seeing it and you see the bird's eye view. But when you watch sports, right, when you watch basketball, when you watch football, you have that bird's eye view where you see where everyone's at. You see everyone. And 2v2, did you watch the Global Championship, right?
The Halo 4 Global? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You remember when it was Pistola taking on Ace and they did the side-by-side screen?
Mm-hmm.
With the pictures underneath? If you got rid of the pictures underneath, you could actually extend the 2v2 screen, so you would technically be able to see all 4 point of views, which might be overwhelming for the viewer, but it might also be badass.
It could be. I think primarily you would need someone like Genius or whatever doing the switchboard Sam in the background.
Well, ideally, you just need a damn spectator mode.
That would be the best, obviously. Yeah. But with failing that, having somebody back there playing the switchboard, putting the point of view on the most exciting thing that's happening, doesn't always work, but it worked really well for 2005 through 2009. Of just trying to stay on the person who has the sniper or whatever. I also think that 2v2s in the Halo sequels are a good bit slower. And there's plenty of times where just hunkering down and watching an area for a little bit is actually the best thing you could do to win the game. And it's not exciting gameplay. It just isn't. So as long as the game is fast-paced enough and there really aren't very many technological limitations anymore, I think 2v2 could definitely be a decent spectator experience.
Okay. I like it. Is there anything else you want to quickly discuss, my man?
I don't think so. I just, like I said, if I could come back to one main point, is that an ideal Halo game is a game where you always have a chance. You're not put in checkmate scenarios where it doesn't matter what you do, this is gonna happen. And two, the best way to make everyone have fun with a good Halo game is to make sure you're only matching up people with similar skill levels. Those are really the two biggest takeaways, I think, for what I would do given 10 years of, study and practice of Halo experience would lead me to believe.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, as you see, we've all agreed that Chaos and I talk too much for commercial breaks, so we're actually going to be doing a podcast here in either next week or the following week. So if you enjoyed this, be on the lookout for that podcast. But as always, we have the UGC Halo 2 Master Chief Collection event coming January 2nd through 4th. If you want to help out with the prize money, buy a crowdfunding shirt. Chaos, my man, thank you for joining me. It was a frickin' pleasure.
Thank you, Gandhi. It was a great time.
I'll see you very soon, my friends. We love you, but we don't love you. Take it easy.